My daughter's best friend falsely accused me to protect her boyfriend. My own daughter believed the lie, humiliated me on social media, and abandoned me without hearing me out. Years of trust collapsed in seconds. Now that the truth has finally come to light, she's back, broken, begging for forgiveness. My name is Andrea, I'm 44 years old, and I'm a nurse at a private clinic here in Texas. I'm a single mother to Laura, who is 17, and for me, she has been the center of my world ever since her father disappeared when Laura was just 5 years old. I always believed our relationship was strong, full of trust, love, and respect. But I was wrong in the worst way possible. Ever since Laura started high school, she had an inseparable friend named Sophie. At first, I liked Sophie. She was a nice girl with that kind of energy that draws people in, and she seemed like a good influence on my daughter. However, over time I noticed something that unsettled me. Sophie had a knack for manipulating situations and people, but no one else seemed to see it. I always found it hard to explain why I felt uncomfortable around her until the truth came out, although by then, it was too late. It all began one Friday afternoon, when Laura came home with the darkest expression I had ever seen on her face. There was something in her eyes that made me stop what I was doing and look at her intently. "Mom," she said in a trembling voice, "I need to talk to you." We sat down in the living room, but I couldn't help noticing how her hands were shaking and how she avoided looking me in the eyes. I thought maybe something bad had happened at school, a problem with a teacher or a friend. What came next shattered me. "Sophie, she said things about you. Horrible things. She says you did something with her boyfriend." I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. What? That couldn't be true. I tried to calm her down, but Laura was already crying and didn't want to hear any explanations. "Mom, how could you?" she whispered. "You betrayed me." I saw everything. My mind was spinning in 1,000 directions, trying to understand what she was even talking about. But Sophie had already planted the seed of doubt in my daughter, and nothing I said could undo that. That night, social media exploded with cruel messages and comments. Blinded by the lie, Laura started publicly humiliating me. Photos and videos went viral, and my name was dragged through the mud, without me being able to defend myself. I tried to talk to Laura, to explain that it was all a lie, that Sophie had made up the story to protect her boyfriend, that she was being manipulated. But every attempt failed. My daughter ignored me, avoided me, and worst of all, blamed me. The house, which had always been a refuge, became a prison of silence and tears. My friends and family started to distance themselves because they didn't want to get involved in the scandal. I felt alone, abandoned by everyone except the pain that consumed me. One day, Laura said something I will never forget. "I don't want to be your daughter," she said. "I want to forget you." It was like a punch straight to the heart. All the love and trust built over the years had vanished in seconds. And I couldn't understand why or how. That was the worst time of my life, when every morning felt like a battle just to stay standing. I didn't just lose my daughter, I also lost my dignity and peace of mind. However, time doesn't stop the truth. Little by little, evidence began to surface that Sophie had lied, manipulating everyone to protect her boyfriend who had made a terrible mistake. But the damage was already done. The days following the false accusation were like living in a never-ending nightmare. The news had spread through Laura's school, the neighborhood, and on social media. The cruel words, the judgmental looks, the phone calls from strangers did all hit me hard, and each day I felt myself sinking deeper. Laura was no longer the sweet girl I knew. She had changed, or rather, the lie had changed her perception of me. The Sophie I once knew, my daughter's innocent friend, had become a master manipulator, an expert at weaving everyone into her web of lies. I remember the first time I tried to talk to Sophie after all this happened. I saw her at a neighborhood meeting, with that smile of false innocence, as if nothing had happened. I confronted her, hoping she would at least understand the damage she had caused. "Sophie, why? Why did you make that up?" I asked, my voice breaking. She looked at me with calculated coldness and, with a sarcastic smile, replied, "It wasn't a lie. I just protected someone who means a lot to me. I'm sorry if you suffered, but that's life." Her words hurt more than any physical blow. It was as if she had no soul, no remorse. And worse yet, she knew Laura believed her blindly. Despite everything, I didn't lose hope. I kept trying to talk to Laura, but every conversation ended in a fight. She yelled at me, accused me, humiliated me. She didn't want to hear any reasoning. She just wanted me to be the villain. "How could you destroy my life?" she said one night, tears in her eyes. "You're worse than a stranger." That sentence is forever etched in my memory. Meanwhile, at the clinic where I work, my colleagues started seeing me differently. Some avoided me, others whispered behind my back. I felt like I had not only lost my daughter, but also my professional identity. The months passed slowly and painfully. I began having anxiety attacks, sleepless nights, and a deep sadness that seemed never-ending. But I couldn't give up. I had to prove the truth. One day, I found irrefutable evidence. Text messages between Sophie and her boyfriend, confessing that it had all been a lie to protect him from a bigger scandal. I also discovered that Sophie had manipulated other students into joining the smear campaign against me. I brought this evidence to Laura, hoping she would finally open her eyes and listen. "Look at this, sweetheart," I said, handing her the messages. "Sophie lied to you. She used you." Laura read them, but her expression didn't change immediately. It was as if a wall had risen between us. "I can't believe you're telling me this now," she responded quietly. "You've destroyed everything." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had shown her the truth, and she still rejected me. For weeks, we didn't speak. Laura shut herself off, and I was consumed by uncertainty and pain. But the truth has a way of coming to light, even if it takes time and leaves destruction in its path. One day, Laura came home in tears she couldn't hold back. "Mom," she said, hugging me tightly, "forgive me. I was a fool. I was blind." Her regret was sincere, but the wounds she left were deep. Could we rebuild what had been broken? When Laura came back home, after months of silence, with tears in her eyes and a broken voice, my heart stirred between hope and fear. I thought that hug, that moment of confession, would be the beginning of our healing. But the reality was much more complicated. The following days were filled with conflicting emotions. Laura seemed remorseful, yes, but also full of guilt and anger, not only toward Sophie but toward me as well. The distance we had accumulated during that time was immense, and every small step toward reconciliation seemed to come with painful setbacks. I tried to talk to her about how I had lived through those months of being ignored, about the pain she had caused me, and about how much I had suffered being humiliated in public. But she wasn't ready to listen. She shut herself in her thoughts and avoided confronting the magnitude of what she had done. "You didn't just lie to me, Mom," she told me one night while crying. "You also failed me. I thought I could trust you to tell me the truth before Sophie manipulated me." Her words pierced through me. How could she, after believing someone who deceived her, say that I had failed her? Our relationship was like a thin thread stretched to its limit, about to snap at any moment. Meanwhile, Sophie remained present at school, enjoying her silent triumph, protected by a circle of friends who supported her version of the story. The helplessness I felt every time I saw her was unbearable. But then, new revelations came, unexpected and devastating. One afternoon, I received an anonymous phone call. A female voice warned me that Sophie hadn't just lied to protect her boyfriend, but had also fabricated other stories against me, even trying to involve me in false legal troubles. I felt as if I were trapped in a maze with no exit, where every step I took was watched, sabotaged, and turned into yet another obstacle. I decided to seek professional help for both Laura and me, a family therapist, someone who could guide our difficult and painful reconciliation. The first sessions were tense, full of tears and uncomfortable silences. Laura was still struggling with her emotions, torn between love for me and the distrust sown by Sophie. But little by little, with effort, we began building a bridge, shaky at times, toward healing. Still, the past continued to haunt us. The public humiliation hadn't disappeared. On social media, in the neighborhood, there were people who still whispered, judged, and remembered the scandal. I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was permanently marked. One night, Laura and I had a heated argument. Her words hurt me more than ever. "You know what?" she shouted. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you completely. I don't know if that's even possible." Those words shattered me, but they also gave me one certainty. Healing would be slow, and trust fragile. I decided not to give up. I promised Laura we would fight together, that I wouldn't let Sophie's lies destroy what remained of our bond. And so we went on, facing each day with pain, hope, and the uncertainty of whether we could ever recover what we had lost. The reunion with Laura, which at first seemed like a ray of hope, soon became an inner torment. She was full of contradictions. On one hand, she sought my closeness, my forgiveness. On the other, she was a whirlwind of resentment, doubt, and guilt that exploded without warning. The house that had once sheltered us with warmth now felt like a minefield, where every word could spark a fight, and every silence could become an open wound. The neighbors, who once greeted me with a smile, now looked at me with pity or disdain. The humiliation I had suffered was no longer confined to the family. It had become a public spectacle I couldn't escape. One afternoon, after an especially bitter argument, Laura broke down in tears, confessing the fear she felt for having been deceived and at the same time for having hurt me. "Mom, I don't know who I am anymore," she sobbed. "I feel broken, lost. And the worst part is that I feel like I've lost you forever." My heart shattered listening to her, because I knew she wasn't just suffering because of Sophie's lies, but also from the guilt of having let herself be manipulated and for rejecting me without giving me a chance to explain. But the worst part was yet to come. Sophie, far from feeling guilty, began intensifying her campaign against me. She used social media to spread rumors, and some parents at school began to question my capacity as a mother and professional. One day, I got a call from the school administration telling me they were investigating an anonymous complaint against me. Fear and anxiety paralyzed me. What more could I possibly endure? I felt like the world was crashing down on me. Not only had I lost my daughter, but now my reputation, my job, and my mental peace were at risk. One night, after an especially hard day, I sat on the kitchen floor, tears falling uncontrollably. I remembered all the times I had sacrificed my health, my time, and my dreams for Laura, and I wondered if it had all been in vain. But in that dark moment, something inside me ignited, a fierce determination not to be defeated by lies and injustice. I decided I would fight with everything I had to clear my name, win back my daughter, and face Sophie. I started gathering evidence, messages, witnesses, confirming Sophie's manipulation. I sought legal help, looking for advice to protect myself and seek justice. But Laura remained fragile ground. Despite her apologies and attempts to get closer, there were still moments when her distrust consumed her. One night, during one of our most honest conversations, she confessed something that left me frozen. "Mom, sometimes I think that if I hadn't trusted Sophie, none of this would have happened. But I also think that if I had believed you, maybe we would have lost the little we have left." Her words hit me straight in the heart. How could I help her heal when she herself was trapped in doubt and fear? For weeks, we stayed in that push and pull, between hope and fear, trying to mend a bond that seemed shattered into 1,000 pieces. But there was a light at the end of the tunnel. One day, a group of students who had been manipulated by Sophie approached me at school, confessing the truth and apologizing for having judged me without reason. It was a giant step toward proving that the lie was finally starting to crumble. Laura, upon hearing those confessions, began to open her eyes again, and although the road ahead was uncertain, a small hope began to grow in our hearts. After months of emotional torment, I felt like we were finally coming up for air. Laura and I were rebuilding what once seemed irreparably broken. We had begun to talk for real, without masks or disguised reproaches. There were shy laughs through tears, healing hugs, and sincere promises that seemed to bring meaning back to our relationship. However, the open wound wasn't closing so quickly. Trust, that delicate thread we had lost, still hung by a breath, fragile and trembling. Every small gesture from Laura was a test, and every silence, a reminder of everything we had lost. But what hurt me the most was the feeling that Sophie's shadow hadn't disappeared. Even though she seemed to have lost control, her actions had left an indelible mark on our lives. The damage hadn't just been emotional, it had been social and professional too. My colleagues still looked at me cautiously, and the school remained under pressure from the false accusations. One afternoon, I received an anonymous message that chilled my blood. "This isn't over. What you know is just the tip of the iceberg. Be careful who you trust." Fear returned with force, but this time it had a different tone. It wasn't just fear. It was the determination to face whatever came next, with the truth as my only weapon. Laura, for her part, began to get involved in the fight, trying to repair the damage Sophie's lie had caused not only to our family, but also to others. Her strength and regret gave me new drive not to give up. We were preparing to face what seemed like an invisible but lethal enemy. Because although it seemed the worst chapter was behind us, I knew this story was far from over. And as night fell over our home, with uncertainty hanging heavy in the air, I couldn't help but wonder, what other secrets was Sophie hiding? And what price would we be willing to pay to survive the storm she had unleashed? The fight for the truth was just beginning, and the wounds Sophie had left open could bring consequences far deeper than we imagined. Update 1. I never imagined that, after beginning to heal, a new blow could shake the little we had managed to rebuild. The call came one night just when Laura and I thought we could finally breathe in peace. A firm, unfamiliar voice spoke to me with words that still echo in my mind. Andrea, not everything you think you know is true. There are things Sophie has hidden from you, things that could change everything. I felt the ground open beneath my feet. What else could be behind that lie? What secrets was Sophie hiding, and why did someone else seem to want us to find them? Laura and I looked at each other without speaking, knowing that our fragile world was about to shake again. We decided to investigate together, despite the fear and uncertainty. And what we found was worse than any false accusation. We discovered messages, conversations, and photos that Sophie had deleted, clues that she hadn't just attacked me, but had also manipulated others to protect her boyfriend, and that the lie that had destroyed our family was only the tip of the iceberg. Worse yet, those actions had legal consequences that could involve Laura without her even knowing. I felt like I was losing control again, but this time I couldn't afford to. I had to protect my daughter and myself from an enemy that now seemed more dangerous than ever. But Sophie wasn't willing to give up, and her web of lies and deceit seemed to grow stronger around us. The question that haunted me was, how far would she be willing to go to keep her truth hidden? And what would we be willing to do to uncover hers? Because this time, it wasn't just about rebuilding our relationship. It was about surviving the storm we had unintentionally unleashed. Update 2. I thought that after so much pain, the worst was already behind us. But I was wrong. As Laura and I dived deeper into that web of lies, reality became even crueler. One afternoon, while reviewing old messages we had recovered, we found something that froze our blood, a conversation between Sophie and someone else, someone very close to us. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. The person I thought was supporting us, who had encouraged me during the darkest moments, was conspiring with Sophie. I felt my world crumble again. But this time the betrayal wasn't just from a fake friend. It came from someone in my own family. Laura saw it in my face and asked me with tears in her eyes, "Who, Mom? Who did this to us?" I had no clear answers. I just knew that the betrayal felt like a dagger plunged into my chest. I decided to confront that person. The conversation was tense, full of accusations and half-truths. But what they revealed left me speechless. Not only were they allied with Sophie, but they also had hidden motives that not even Sophie knew about. The web was becoming more complex, darker. Amidst that storm, Laura and I had to make a choice: fight together against an enemy that seemed invincible, or surrender to betrayal and pain. The answer seemed clear, but the path ahead would be harder than I ever imagined. And as the truth slowly came to light, I asked myself, was there someone else playing with us? And how much time did we have left before everything fell apart again? Update 3. The betrayal we had uncovered didn't just break my heart. It opened a dark abyss that seemed to swallow us with every step we took. After that tense confrontation with the family member who had allied with Sophie, reality began to fall apart piece by piece. I couldn't understand how someone so close to me, someone I had trusted blindly, could be working against us. Laura, her eyes filled with tears, confessed to me that she felt like her entire world was falling apart. "Mom," she said one night, as she wrapped her arms around my neck, "why did they do this to us? Why couldn't they just leave us alone?" Her broken voice pierced my soul. In that moment, I understood that this battle wasn't just mine. It was hers too. And that if I wanted to save our family, I would have to be stronger than ever. But Sophie wouldn't stay still. While we were trying to piece our life back together, she kept moving her pieces in the shadows. One early morning, I received an anonymous message warning me of something worse. Sophie had started manipulating other people in our community, spreading lies about me and Laura that could destroy not just our reputation, but also our safety. I couldn't sit idly by. I decided to seek legal and emotional help, and although I felt many turn their backs on me, a few true friends began to come forward to support us. But the pressure was unbearable. At work, the rumors began. At Laura's school, the harassment intensified, and at home, the tension grew more each day. One night, after an anxiety episode, Laura confessed something that paralyzed me. "Mom, sometimes I think I don't deserve you anymore," she said, her voice broken. "If only I had listened to your side before judging you, maybe everything would be different." Her words tore through my chest. I promised her we would move forward together, but deep down, I knew the battle would be long and cruel. Then came the moment to face Sophie directly. I convinced Laura that it was necessary to close that chapter. The meeting was tense, filled with reproaches and painful truths. Sophie showed no remorse. On the contrary, She seemed to enjoy the power her lies gave her. When I tried to speak to her about all the damage she had caused, she said something that made my blood run cold. "This is just the beginning. You have no idea what I did to protect my boyfriend, and I won't stop until you pay for trying to destroy me." Her gaze was like that of a cornered animal, ready to attack. In that instant, I realized the enemy was more dangerous than I had imagined. Not only had we lost years of trust and love, but now we were facing someone who wouldn't hesitate to drag us into the abyss to save herself. But something inside me refused to give up. Laura and I, despite our wounds, decided to join forces like never before. We weren't going to let lies and betrayal destroy everything we had fought for. However, as we planned our defense, a new message appeared on my phone, a message that left me frozen. "What you think you know is just another lie. Sophie is not alone. The truth is much darker, and it's closer than you think." Fear gripped me once again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just fear for myself or for Laura. It was fear of what was still to be uncovered. The battle was far from over. Update 4. After the anonymous message we received, Laura and I knew there was still a deeper layer of deceit. Something moved in the shadows, and this time, it wasn't just Sophie. There was someone else. We started reviewing every conversation, every old post, every connection Sophie had within our surroundings. What we discovered left us speechless. Sophie had created a false network of testimonies, fake profiles, and altered evidence. But she hadn't done it alone. A teacher from Laura's school was involved. A woman who had always treated me with veiled disdain, who seemed to enjoy judging me from her pedestal of false morality. This teacher, supposedly concerned about Laura, had been the first to report me to school authorities as potentially abusive. She based her claim on lies Sophie had whispered to her, but that she maliciously amplified. She had her own issues with single parents, and apparently, I had become the perfect target to project her hatred. Social services investigated me. I was pulled out of the hospital for a week. I lost patience, credibility, even friends. It was a never-ending nightmare. The neighborhood was filled with rumors. People looked at me as if I wore a sign that said "monster" around my neck. And Laura, still grappling with her guilt, could barely walk with her head held high. I couldn't give up. Not after having come so far. With the help of an incredible lawyer, an old colleague from the clinic, we began gathering evidence. Recordings, emails, deleted posts, digital backups, everything. But the strongest blow came when we found another one of Sophie's victims. A girl named Rachel who, years earlier, had also been destroyed by one of her lies. Sophie had falsely accused her of stealing her boyfriend and managed to get her expelled from school. Rachel agreed to testify. The story gained traction. Local media started taking interest. What began as a personal drama was turning into a public case. And then, a justice. The teacher was suspended. The school board forced her to issue a public apology after the investigation. Sophie was summoned to court. Even though she had been a minor at the time, she was required to appear with her parents. The judge recognized that her actions had been malicious, premeditated, and destructive. She didn't go to prison, but she was sentenced to community service, and most importantly, her record was marked. And Laura, my daughter, my girl, who had been manipulated and used as a weapon against me, was finally able to stand before everyone and tell her truth. With a trembling, yet firm voice, she asked for forgiveness. From me, from the world, from herself. That was the hardest part to witness. Because even though everything was being resolved, I knew that no apology could ever give us back the years of unconditional love that hatred and lies had burned to ashes in seconds. But we did recover something: hope. Slowly, we began to rebuild what Sophie had nearly destroyed completely. There are still scars. There are nights when Laura cries over everything she lost. There are days when I wake up remembering the emptiness, the rage, the humiliation. But there are also longer hugs, honest conversations. A bond that, though broken, is being welded back together with something stronger than before: truth. And just when I thought we could finally breathe, a new email arrived.
No sender.
Just a short message. You still don't know what Sophie hid in the end. Or who is truly behind it all. I don't know if I'm ready to keep digging, but if I do, I won't do it alone.